A hearty good afternoon to you here on the Chatty Bench. It's not the Chatty Bench because that's elsewhere, and on a day like today, it's actually probably melting. And I didn't want to take the chance of us melting in the summer sun. This is our summer. Take good of it because it might not be back again. Welcome to the Chatty Bench. I'm Donagh McKeown for your Lurgan, and with me today, a very special guest. They're always special guests. Anyone who's a guest is a guest. And my guest today is Martin O'Neill, not the footballer, not that you get that confused. Were you ever a footballer, Martin?
Oh, I played a wee bit back in the day. Back in the day, yeah.
Back in the day. So Martin is Lurgan born and bred. We're going to get a little bit of his life story, I hope, and then a little bit of insight into well-being, into wellness, and the whole idea of that. Perhaps how you can improve your wellness and your own story within that, Martin. Where does the story start for you? Born and bred in Lurgan?
Born and bred in Lurgan, Lake Street in Lurgan, in the prefabs as they were. This is before Kewilkie Estate was built, and then we moved when I was very small into a house in Kewilkie, and that's where I was raised up until I was about 18. And it was a happy life, generally a happy life.
Was there a sense of well-being, of wellness and encouraging your health, do you think?
There was old school kind of good neighbourliness and uh, plain food, good honest food and good honest cooking. And mum and dad both worked and were very diligent workers. Sometimes my mum had 2 or 3 jobs that she would do. And I was just saying this morning to my wife, she never complained. I never heard her complaining about work. You know, some people complain about having to go to work. She never complained. And she reared a family of 5, and never a complaint out of her about those issues. Whereas nowadays people seem to find a lot of reasons to complain about things.
It's a mindset at the end of the day, isn't it?
I think it
suppose.
is.
So from 18 onwards, schooling and all the rest of it behind you, did you have a fixed idea of what you were going to do with your life?
Um, I got a scholarship to a good school, a grammar school, and I blew it. I lost my way, and I left school feeling a complete failure at about between 15 and 16 years old. Went and then did an apprenticeship, did mechanical engineering for a few years, and then worked at welding, and I became a pipe welder. Went to live in Dublin, and then Cork, and then I moved to London.
All of those very different from your background in
Mm,
Lurgan. I mean, Cork, Dublin, big cities, and then
mhm,
London.
yeah.
What was the differences? What did you see or anticipate at that
Well,
time?
when I left here, the troubles was going really bad. It was like this was about 1972 or three, and things were just horrible here. Just really, really bad, and I was glad to get out of it. To tell you the truth, went to Dublin, and it seemed like when I moved down south, it was like there was no hassle at all. Everybody just seemed very normal, whereas up here it wasn't normal at all. Moved to Cork, and it was I sort of joked that Cork seemed like Disneyland to me because people would sing at you, and
How old are you?
it
Are you
was,
doing all right now?
yeah, they would
Or was
sing to
that
you.
Welsh?
Yeah, they sound a bit like the Welsh people in ways. And lived down there for a couple of years. I really loved Cork, and then things just went bad. I got made redundant, and so on. The economy went a bit funny, and ended up um, going home for a while, and then I moved to London. When I was home here, I started the first karate club in the town. I think it was the first one. I came back here as a brown belt and thought I was a tough guy and trained a lot of boys, a lot of local tough guys, and we used to beat the lumps out of each other, uh, and that was great crack altogether. Um, then I moved to London and was working at my welding job, um, working at pipe welding and doing very nice job, nice work, very, very classy work for companies like St. Ivel, you know, the ones who make the fruit juice and so on. So it was like stainless steel work and aluminium and so on. So I like that. And then I had discovered the Open University. I was unemployed for a while and was just knocking around the house and really, really fed up. and I somehow discovered the Open University. Looking at those guys, they used to be on BBC Two late at night. They all looked like big long-haired hippie guys with big giant collars on their shirts and ties that were just massive. And they used to be on at like 11 or 12 at night, and you'd sit up and listen to lectures. And did the first year of the what they call their social sciences foundation course. Somehow I got through it. I don't know how I got through it, but I got through it anyway.
What drew
And
you to that particular course, as it were?
I was doing volunteering through my youth club, and I sort of fell into it in a way. I'd always been interested in society and group work and sociology, and the social sciences kind of drew that to me, or drew me to it. And so when I got to London, my girlfriend then, who's now my wife, my darling wife, she she found out that I could get a scholarship as a mature student if I applied for one. So went and got the forms and went for an interview at college, and passed the interview. I don't know how I got through it. Passed the interview anyway. The guy, an English guy, was very interested in my background in terms of coming from Northern Ireland, and asking me a lot of questions about what was going on and my reaction to it and so on, what I had done, and my voluntary work and so on. So uh, that got me in, and I did a degree, a combined degree in social science and social work. Uh, and then my career path went into social work from that, and I had sort of spent the last, or the then 30-year career in social work, working in London. I worked in the East End of London, in Tower Hamlets and Bethnal Green. Um,
Fair to say, from this distance or from that sort of time, they were tough areas.
Very, very, very poor areas, because, and it was a bit of a shock to me to see the city of London isn't very far from where I was working in Shoreditch, which I think is now, it's quite a gentrified place. Then it was a very poor place. And I worked on an estate there called John Square House, doing a social survey and trying to help the Tenants Association in their work. And the state of the houses there was just unbelievable. You wouldn't believe the state of the houses. There was a house, a flat there with a man and his son, and the house was covered in black fungi from every wall and the ceilings. And can you imagine the spores coming out of that and what it was doing to people's health? So I worked on that, trying to improve those housing conditions. And I also then worked for a while as a probation officer, and really enjoyed it as well. Completely different, because the way the court system operates is completely different than the way a community worker or a social work community worker would work. And it was very official. Had to go to court and write court reports and so
A
on
lot
and
of
present.
dehumanisation in all of that, by the sound of it.
Well, to some extent, I represented people who, were having difficult circumstances. Some of them had committed petty crimes, some more serious crimes, some at risk of losing their liberty. And it was very interesting and, very emotional time as well, because I remember going to visit a woman way up, and it was in East Ham, and she had been battered senseless by her husband. And it was like she had a lovely wee girl, and just your heart goes out to people. You try to help them as best you can, and I did. So then I came back from London and started work. Got a job as a community social worker out in Craigavon with the old Craigavon and Banbridge Trust. Or it was a unit of management at that stage. So I worked in the trust for about 19 years as a community social worker, team leader, and senior manager.
I
And
mean, did it match any of the problems that you saw in London? At least one would be led to believe the housing was of a superior quality. We hope, but no certainty. It sounds very Dickensian almost, what you came across in London. Not quite as far back as that, but but how were things when you arrived in Craigavon, as it were?
I got the shock in my life, because I'd come from a place where um, housing was at a premium. You couldn't get a house for love nor money in London. You couldn't get a flat, certainly a council flat. And when I arrived in Craigavon, there were swathes of estates with seemingly no one living there. I walked through an estate called Rathmore, and there was no one living there. It was as if someone had dropped what was called, what do you call, a neutron bomb, which gets rid of all the people, but the buildings stay up. And it was just such a shock. And then there were estates there where people were having a hard time as well. I remember uh, in the winter time, people couldn't afford to keep their electricity on. I think we're going into that situation this winter, perhaps. And people were using paraffin oil heaters and candles and whatever they could find to light their homes. And a lot of poverty, a lot of people who had been decanted, shall we say, from Belfast, and people who had been put out, maybe people who had had mixed marriages or whatever, for whatever reason, ended up in Craigavon. And the salt of the earth living there as well, people who were really struggling, and a lot of the people who were trying to do their best in their communities as well, at the same time having a very difficult time personally or with their families as well. So it was a real honour and a privilege to work there.
The whole idea of wellness and talking about well-being seems to be a very modern thing in the last 3, 4, 5 years, particularly. It's exponential growth
Mhm.
in people's concern and about it. Was there much concern of that overall individual wellness, that overall provision of offering some sense of well-being to the people that you were with, or was it just simply putting a little postage stamp over the cracks, or much
Yeah.
more than that?
Sometimes it felt you were putting a sticking plaster over a much bigger problem, but you do your best. And wellness and well-being has always been a part of my life and my work. And seeing the the holistic view of a person, not just as an atomized individual, but as a part of a family or a group or part of society and part of a community, and that's been very important to me. And I think that for me, it has to start with myself, and it starts with an individual. There's no point in me going and looking health from somebody else for them to give it to me. It has to start from within and from your own uh, mental, spiritual, emotional, physical well-being. And no one can give that to you. You have to seek it yourself. It has to come from within, and you have to search for it to some extent. And I think finding that is part of life.
How does someone in the social services side of things enhance that? Either bring it to the boil, or bring something to the party that brings people towards it. Because I, like you, do believe you can't force people
Mm.
into being. If you want to use the word woke, I don't even want to use the word woke, but to want to look for themselves. Can you do that? And could you do it? You obviously have, if
Mm-hmm.
it's in your own ethos. And are there movements towards that in current social practice?
I think that health health to me, no one can give it to you. You have to seek it. And for me, one example of that was, looking at a problem, not just as an individual problem, but looking at it as more of a community issue, and speaking to people and finding out what the issues were for them and trying to get some kind of agreement on a way forward. And what that helped people to do was to find their own path as well. Because I remember, and I think I spoke to you before about this, was there is a drug problem in our society. There's a drug problem in our town, and it's in every town. There was a drug problem where I was working, and it was an emerging drug problem at that time, maybe 25 years ago. And the question was, what do we do about it? Do we have a medical solution to it? No, we don't really. There's a medical solution to some of it, but it's a societal problem. Um, and what I did was I spoke to the local community and found out what the level of the drug problem was. I was speaking to medical practitioners as well and colleagues within the health and social care system, speaking to the community. And what we did was we arranged a visit down to a community drugs project in Dublin called Ballymun Youth Action. And when we got down there, we heard their story. And Ballymun at that time was notorious. It had the big tower
Big tower
blocks,
blocks, yeah.
which were regarded as an absolute disaster. And they had a huge heroin problem at that time. And when we spoke to the Ballymun Youth Action staff, they told us that they'd tried everything in Ballymun to get rid of drug dealers. They'd tried kicking the doors in, putting people out. They said they'd tried baseball bats. They had tried the guards, getting the guards more and more involved in policing the area. None of it worked. And they told me that what did work was community education, getting the community and families and individuals involved in educating themselves about what the problem was. If that was an addiction problem, if that was a drug problem or an alcohol problem. And that education program brought people to the realization that they were empowering themselves through getting involved in that. And the feedback loop then went from working on that project, working on those issues, into themselves, into their families, and them feeling a sense of empowerment through that. And I think that to me was a very, very strong message that we, by working together in partnership with communities, with individuals and families, that we can make a difference. And I think that's what's really, really good about our society here, that still exists.